Welcome back to Kababayan Today. I'm Brandon Reilly, filling in for G Tonji. Let's rediscover now Princess Urduja. Princess Urduja is a legendary Filipina in at least a few senses of the word. One of our most celebrated cultural heroes, she has been represented countless times in Filipino comics, television, cartoons, print literature, theater, and movies since independence in 1946. Most recently, she was a titular subject of the 2008 animated film Urduja. Who was Princess Urduja? Many Filipinos have come to believe that she was a princess in Pangasinan in the 14th century. But is this historically accurate? For answers to questions about her origins, we should return to the original source that represented her in the first place. The first, and in fact only glimpse we have of the fabled warrior princess comes from the pen of the renowned Berber Muslim traveler Ibn Battuta. Ibn Battuta's travelogue of his years spent journeying across Asia from 1332 to 1347 makes mention of a certain Urduja who is princess of a land he called Tawalisi. This is the one definitive source we have of Urduja. Since the time of Reilly, who himself tried to locate Tawalisi on a map so that he could track the princess down, scholars have tried to ascertain further details about this legendary figure. And so far, none has found any corroboration. Is Urduja then a mythical figure, one that didn't exist in history? William Henry Scott, the Dean of Pre-Hispanic Filipino History, concluded in his 1968 book, Pre-Hispanic Source Materials for the Study of Philippine History, that such was the case. David Waynes, scholar of Islamic history and author of a book on Ibn Battuta's travels, wrote that the tale of Urduja was, quote, a concoction of motifs drawn from tales of warrior women that belonged to a vast corpus of folk tales and popular epics that circulated throughout the Muslim world in Arabic, Persian, and Turkish, incorporating scores of stories not only similar to those in the 1001 Nights tales, but often overlapping with them in content. In other words, he viewed the story to be a stitching together of stories and literary devices drawn from Islamic literature rather than from Ibn Battuta's actual observations of Asia. But to reduce the story of Urduja to its possible links to Islamic literature or its historical basis in pre-modern Filipino history or anything else is to miss the importance of the princess entirely. Urduja may or may not have been a figment of Ibn Battuta's imagination. She may or may not have been an actual warrior princess in a place like Pangasinan. What the truth is, we'll never know for sure. But there is one thing about Urduja that is certain. For centuries now, she has been and remains an enduring symbol for the Filipino people. Whether this is because we are not strangers to the figures of assertive femininity who justly rule their people, lead them into battle, protect and nurture them, or because of something else, is something we can debate. Something about her nonetheless resonates with us, and for that reason, she is ours. Historians may never locate the historical Urduja of a ruler of Tawalisi that may or may not have existed in myth, but no matter. Our Kababayans know, and have known for quite some time, that Princess Urduja is indeed a real legend. And now our double dose of no history, no self. Let's turn first to the Babaylanes. When someone asks you, who are the religious leaders in the Philippines today, who do you imagine? Men, right? All of the priests, imams, and traditional spiritualists are overwhelmingly male. So it might surprise you to know that for most of Philippine history, the opposite was true. For most of the last 2,000 years, it was women who were the predominant and sometimes only spiritual guides for the Filipinos. Before there were priests and imams, there existed in the Philippines a shaman called Baylan. When the Spanish arrived in the mid-1500s, they took notice of the importance of the Filipinos as shamans, almost all of whom were women. Called Baylan or Babaylan in the Visayas, Baylan, Mabaylan or Baylan in Mindanao, and Katalunan in the Tagalog regions, they performed all of the religious rituals in daily life, including invocations to cure the sick, to bring about a bountiful harvest or a successful birth, recitations to tell the future, consecrate a marriage, oversee the passage of a deceased one to the afterlife, and more. For every major event in the community's life, Filipinos employed bailanes. Without them, those occasions simply couldn't take place. It wasn't by chance that all of them were women. To be a bailan, one had to be a woman. Ancient Filipinos, much like their counterparts throughout Southeast Asia, believed that women who had the singular ability to create life possessed unique spiritual powers that men simply did not or could not. For this reason, they believed women to be uniquely well suited to communicating with the spirits. This is why most of the bailanes throughout history were women. Spiritual pursuits necessitated a woman's power. For Filipinos, there was no spirituality without femininity. Most bailanes were women, but not all. Some men did in fact become bailanes. How did those men become shamans? How did they break into a field that was overwhelmingly dominated by women? Well, this is an interesting history in itself, one that further highlights the connection between femininity and the divine. When a man wanted to become a bailan, it wasn't simply as easy as apprenticing with the bailan and learning all of her chants, ritual techniques, and so forth. Aside from learning all the tricks of the trade, a male apprentice additionally had to learn to walk like a woman, speak like a woman, and carry herself, like a female in every way. In this instance, he was called an asog. In other words, a male who aspired to be a religious figure literally had to become a woman to be able to do so. Again, without femininity, there was no religion. So what happened to the bailanes? The simplest answer is that they fell victim to the Spanish Catholic Church's campaign to convert the Filipinos. Soon after colonizing the Philippines, the missionaries realized how central the bailanes were to Filipino religion and culture. Accordingly, they tried to turn the Filipinos against the bailanes by converting the children and then later the adults and then the elderly, and teaching those converts in turn to ostracize the bailanes and banish them from their communities. This strategy unfortunately worked. As Spanish colonialism wore on and the majority of lowland Filipinos became Christian, their former spiritual guides began to fade away to the point where very few of them exist today. And along with them disappeared a wealth of distinctly Filipino cultural knowledge, folk medicinal practices, and perhaps most regrettably, millennia-old forms of religious practice that venerated rather than subordinated women. As we look across the global Filipino diaspora and see the near total absence of women in positions of leadership throughout Philippine Christianities, Islams, and other religions, we should question whether male supremacy, the subordination of women simply because they are women, should be the foundation of our spiritual practices. Not that long ago, Filipinos pioneered a more equitable gender order, one grounded in our religions and symbolized by the bailanes. Maybe in this century, we can resurrect this tradition and rediscover the bailanes in all of us.